For me, Venice is a city and a place that is probably the most important place to present new ideas within architecture and art. And I feel it is also a great opportunity to push the discussion forward and bring something to the table that I find relevant. This exhibition here in the Danish Pavilion in the Giardini area in Venice, it's about simultaneously restoring the Danish Pavilion permanently and then at the same time stage an exhibition purely based on the construction waste that we produce as part of that construction process. So it really is kind of like an open laboratory that we create or some kind of experiment. And I think what is important to notice in this project is that in opposition to the normal way to produce an exhibition or to bring in a concept to a certain place, we try to stay as malleable as possible, to stay as open as possible. And by inviting a lot of researchers and specialists on board, we listen to them and we ask them to analyze the materials on site. And we try to see what kind of form, what kind of narratives can emerge organically, naturally, based on our findings. And then we try to develop a concept based on our findings. So it's really the upside down way of working. It's really to invert the architectural method in a way. And everything that we produce as part of this process will stay inside the pavilion, both in the exhibition period as well after. So the idea is that we stage the exhibition. After the exhibition is over, we're going to cross it all, put it down to the ground again, and we will cast a new floor on top with the existing natural stones and the cock hall, as well as a terrazzo made out of all the aggregates from the cross bricks or the cross tiles from the former floor. So it really becomes this process, this metabolistic process where the existing building kind of heals itself. And we're just using this in-between space, or this in-between process, or this window of opportunities in between these two stages of what it used to be and what it might become in the future to stage an exhibition. But I think we have a very good understanding right now on what we will find here. But I think we will also, I guess it will be the same, more or less, that we will find throughout at least the area inside this space here. And then we'll have this, what is it, like 50 centimeters of gravel before we'll find clay in the bottom. The first thing we do is trying to get a better understanding of what is present. Like we are registering the existing environment, like the initial condition, because that's our whole platform. That's the thing that we have to work with later on in the process. And we try to get as close to that as possible. And I feel as deeper as we dive into the existing materials and the existing elements that are present, we find natural logics, we found boundaries, and we find other types of relevance that we would normally never see. So I feel it is needed, and I will always prefer spending more time in these initial phases just trying to understand the existing, because I feel as more as I understand the existing, it's easier for me to predict the future.
We conducted multiple scans in different places. We have one in particular, no, two actually, that shows the different layers quite well, and also the reinforcement bars.
So these are the layers that we detected, and we found 4 main layers.
Can we see just if we go for a 2D view, like this one, is that a section?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so here we can start to see a grid structure. I feel it's important to listen because suddenly it's not just about what is present, it's also about their inherent properties and their inherent qualities. So it's really about figuring out the material properties. That's at least always my starting point. Like, what are their compression strengths? What are their tensile strengths? What kind of environment do that specific material thrive in? How can it react together with the other materials that are already present at a specific site? And how does that reaction take place? And can we, as architects, as researchers, as curators, can we alter that interaction, or can we facilitate that interaction? So it's a natural step on top of looking into all the existing materials that we really try to understand what are they capable of. First, when we approached this project, we went there, did analysis, and we made this particle distribution chart to see what kind of soil is underneath this existing concrete slab. And by doing that, we figured out there's actually an abundance of clay here, there's abundance of silt and sand. And if you mix that correctly, then you can form compressed earth, which can be used both for construction purposes, so it could be used for floors and etc. That was some of our first things from our analysis, from our findings. And then, of course, we wanted to do that. We wanted to use that in some way because it was already there and that would make sense. And I feel like the second layer was to look into the concrete. And together with researchers from the Danish Technical University, we scanned the whole concrete floor in the pavilion. And we could see where there was put rebars into this concrete, where there was cracks, where there wasn't any rebars, the porosity of the concrete. And through that knowledge, we suddenly could make a cutting plan to extract not just concrete, but actually components cut directly out of the existing floor. And those could be used for different purposes, depending on the quality, depending on whether they had rebars or not. And then the third layer of utilization, you could say in this case, was that we still had a lot of abundance of mineral materials such as sand and silt. And then we consulted with researchers that was working with both bio-based concrete types, and they were looking into what kind of binders do we find in abundance in the Venetian lagoon. And so we tested out with a lot of different candidates, and we figured out that both alginate, which there is a lot of, and also gelatine was 2 good candidates that worked very well together with the materials that we had as leftover materials on the site. And then we started to cast boards and profiles out of these leftover materials that we could use as components for a table that we were about to build up. It was just one step at a time. It was a very iterative process where we tried to stay open constantly, and we didn't knew exactly where the project would take us. But we were consulting with all these researchers constantly, and we brought them to the pavilion. We required from them that they were doing investigation on the site, and we tried to see how much can we gather from these investigations of these analysis, and how much could that form the idea of the exhibition. Okay. I feel the whole discussion about how we can build the future architecture still takes its starting point in a very old-fashioned way on looking on resources, where you accept that you always go out in nature and harvest your materials and you process them, and then they can take part as a building component later on in architecture. But when we look at the buildings that is being built today, most of the buildings is actually being built in areas where you already have buildings. So I feel there is something counterintuitive to that. I feel we have to be better at looking at the resources that we have already processed, resources that we already put into this world. And not just for saving energy and saving resources, also because they are embedded with a lot of poetic qualities. They have traces of history. They have their own narratives. And if we work with these materials in the right way, we can use that as a stepping stone to create architecture that works kind of like a bridge between the past and the present, and also potentially towards the future, because it kind of like, it holds a lot of artifacts that are relevant for different time periods. And I feel there is a huge potential in this, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not really investigated right now. And we try to do that as much as possible. I think materials, they can perform in various ways. And I see that often we try to push materials into situations where they are not really performing well. They're not really using their inherent qualities in the right way. And I think there is something counterintuitive to that. I think there is, if you flip that process around and go and try to understand the materials first, figuring out what can they actually do, and especially when you work with existing materials that has already been processed, it's not just about understanding the logic of natural materials. It's really about diving into these complex structures, the debris and the leftover from building cultures that has developed over years. Then suddenly you see that there's potential here that has not been fully utilized. And if you listen carefully, you can also start to see that there are forms and geometries and logics that emerge just from understanding the materials right. And I think this is where architecture to me is inspiring, and this is where I found the boundaries that I like to work within, because the architecture becomes kind of a medium for the materials to express themselves.